Hi there and welcome to The Wrap, simple news updates for busy people. Brought to you by Verashni Pillay and explain.coza. So look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Things are getting real in South Africa. Stay safe and help our healthcare workers who are battling increased caseloads and enormous personal strain. On the other hand, with more time comes more knowledge and information. We summarize the latest medical breakthroughs that could see us emerge from this pandemic as soon as possible. So, let's dive into the big stories of today. The storm is here. Remember that calm before the pandemic storm we kept talking about for ages? Well, it's properly here. Gauteng is now the epicenter of the virus and is quickly approaching the peak of active infections. Hospital beds are filling up and medical professionals are already telling stories of having to choose who gets oxygen. The average daily increase in infections surpassed 10,000 this week, and authorities are deeply concerned that South Africans have largely acted like the lockdown is over. Come on, guys. The president is due to address the nation tonight at around 8 p.m. and he's widely expected to crack the whip. Now, the National Coronavirus Command Council and Cabinet held meetings last week to discuss possible new restrictions after the premiers of our 9 provinces raised the alarm about the daily increase in cases, as reported in today's Sunday Times. It's becoming increasingly clear that hospitals won't cope. The Gauteng provincial government's proposal for an intermittent lockdown was refused last week. The province is now the epicenter of the virus and it accounts for 35.2% of South Africa's total cases. This is followed by the Western Cape with just over 29% of cases. Now, there are currently only 8,300 beds in the province in terms of ICU cases, but there could be a need for over 50,000 beds by September. These projections are from figures released by the Gauteng COVID-19 Command Council on the 2nd of July, so those could change. Now, with the crisis looming, the president may reintroduce some restrictions tonight. This could include a curfew, again, more restrictions on the sale of alcohol, limiting travel between provinces, and limiting passenger capacity in taxis. So, a lot of those things we were glad were done with might be coming back. But of course, remember, these are just rumors. Let's wait on the president and the gazetted regulations for the final guidelines, because that's when we really know what's what. In the meantime, remember that things are getting more volatile as we approach the peak. Don't take any unnecessary risks at this time and do your best to stay safe. We've put together a guide on how to live responsibly during the current lockdown level, and I've linked to that below this podcast. Time for your news briefs. In our regular feature on accountability, we told you last week how a man was dragged naked out of his shack during an eviction in Khayelitsha. Now, the city of Cape Town has since suspended 4 officers who were involved in the evictions, pending an investigation. We hope that this will galvanize the city to address the anti-poor policies and policing it has been criticized for, including the illegality of evictions during the lockdown. Secondly, hello darkness, my old friend. Remember when load shedding was our biggest problem as a nation in those heady days before Corona? Well, thanks to the heinous cold front we've been recently experiencing, electricity demand has soared. This has put strain on Eskom's units, causing a breakdown. So, Eskom implemented nationwide stage 2 load shedding this week, not to be confused with the level 3 lockdown. Lots of levels for you to be keeping track of. Now, Eskom says that we need to brace ourselves for more in the week ahead. So check your load shedding schedule and prepare for the outages. Plus, do your part to keep electricity usage low, as that will help all of us. Meanwhile, you may have heard a new term lately, load reduction. Load reduction made its debut in about mid-May this year. Unlike load shedding, which covers most areas, load reduction targets neighborhoods where illegal connections overload the infrastructure. Now, this goes some way towards accountability where individuals refuse to adhere to the user pay principle and make use of illegal connections. These are incredibly dangerous for both electrocution and fire risk, particularly in high-density informal settlements. It puts enormous strain on transformers, which can then explode. Now, a destroyed transformer cannot be repaired. It has to be replaced at a cost of up to 100,000 Rand each. So think about all the transformers that get destroyed. Damage from illegal connections has cost Gauteng 1 billion rand in the past year alone. So Eskom is now putting its foot down and switching off power when it sees signs of illegal power use. This is a good thing in many ways, but on the other hand, we must remember that we live in an unequal country where structural problems are partly responsible for people living without formal housing and access to safe electricity connections. With nowhere else for people in illegal settlements to go, the implementation of load reduction in these areas can be seen as a triple punishment to the poorest communities in our country. Hostage drama at Gauteng Church. In a local story that made international headlines, a hostage situation at a church saw 5 people killed and 40 people arrested. The incident included members of the police, South African National Defence Force, and correctional services. Now, details aren't clear, but news reports indicate that a group of men from a splintered church group stormed into the International Pentecostal Holiness Church in Zuurbekom, Gauteng, on Saturday morning. They allegedly wanted to take over the premises due to a feud over the church's leadership that started in 2016, the BBC reported, because it made its way to publications like the BBC. Now, police say dozens of weapons, including shotguns, rifles, and pistols, were seized from the premises. WHO not ruling out airborne transmission. Isn't 2020 just the gift that keeps giving? New evidence suggests that the coronavirus could be airborne. In its latest transmission guide published on Thursday, the World Health Organization said some outbreak reports show the potential for transmission by air. Now, these take place in indoor crowded spaces such as a choir practice, in restaurants, or in fitness classes, wherever people are sort of shouting at each other or towards each other. But the evidence is not yet conclusive and is still being researched. Now, Wits University professor and member of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, Professor Shabir Mahdi, told Times Live this week that scientists underestimated the airborne transmission of COVID-19. Remember, we were told that it can only happen when someone sort of like coughs on you and it can't just float around in the air. Well, that's not so clear anymore. Mahdi explained that airborne transmissions can occur when extremely small microdroplets are suspended in the air for a reasonable amount of time. That means when the infected person may have not even been there anymore. Now, when people who are in the vicinity or in a poorly ventilated room inhale the contaminated microdroplets, they get infected. Mahdi says this could be why we're seeing such a rapid increase in cases everywhere. He warns that it's now even more important to keep your mask on. So guys, this means over your nose too. There's really no point in wearing a mask otherwise. EFF MPs vote against their own policies. This one's pretty crazy. The EFF says they will be taking their members to task in the National Council of Provinces when some of them voted against an amendment bill barring marriage officials from refusing to marry same-sex couples. The party has apologized to the LGBTI community. Cricketer Lungi Ngidi faces backlash for supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. So, South African cricket player Lungi Ngidi has faced a backlash for taking a stance over the Black Lives Matter movement from some of his fellow cricket players. Now, this is a time where the world is taking up this important conversation, and Ngidi wanted the national cricket team to take a stand in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. But former cricketers Rudy Steyn, Pat Simcox and Boeta Dippenaar instead took an all lives matter approach and confronted Ngidi about his comments on social media. They said Ngidi would be better off discussing the recent upsurge of farm murders. They added that Ngidi should take his own stance if he wants to, but should not involve the rest of the team. So much for solidarity. Thankfully, not all white cricketers are so woefully out of touch. Vince van der Bijl is 71 and he won the Cricketer of the Year award in 1981. He told Sports24 he felt duty-bound to add his voice to Ngidi's cause. He said, "As a South African, not to speak out would fail to understand South Africa's influence in this moment due to our history of racial degradation of those of colour." He said he saluted Ngidi, noting all the Black Lives Matter movement wants is for black lives to be elevated to those of whites. He went on to say on Facebook, "I really believe we as cricketers have it in us to help heal these great divides in privilege, race, religion and attitudes. Only then can we be a proper united nation. That is worth dying for." Wow, a 71-year-old is having to school certain former white cricketers. They could definitely learn from Van der Bijl. On to our solutions part, and this is one of my favorite parts of the podcast. Treatments, trials and vaccines. Remember the COVID-19 vaccine trial that kicked off 2 weeks ago in South Africa? We told you a little bit about it. The good news is that things have been going smoothly, and if the trial is successful, South Africa could have the first COVID-19 vaccine as early as the first quarter of 2021. That's just next year, guys. But before we get too excited, Professor Mahdi again said that it's all dependent on the results of the clinical trials. He told Reuters that from the 19 vaccines being tested, the most positive outcome would be if even 2 of those succeed. In other positive medical news, the first COVID-19 antibody rapid blood test kit has been approved for use in South Africa by the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. These blood tests detect traces of COVID-19 antibodies, which fight off viruses in your body, as opposed to the tests that just look for the actual virus. Now, these tests are more effective because they help establish whether a person has built immunity to a virus and to determine the effectiveness of a potential vaccine. The test will become available when the Ministerial Advisory Committee works out its testing strategy. Plus, some more good medical news. A drug combination used for hepatitis C has shown promising results for patients with moderate to severe COVID-19 cases in one small international trial. Now, City Press reported today that South Africa is one of 5 countries doing randomized clinical trials to confirm the results. Dealing with anxiety, an explain.co.za guide. Now, Friday was Panic Awareness Day, a day to remind people who suffer from mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and panic attacks that they are not alone. It's not taboo, and it's okay to talk about it and ask for help. This is especially important while living through a pandemic. Chances are you or someone you know will get the virus, and someone you know may pass away during this time. It's a lot to take in, and we all need to be kind to ourselves and to prepare. Here's how you can recognize the signs of a panic attack according to the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. A quickening heart rate, nausea, hot or cold flashes, numbing or tingling in the hands and feet, and shortness of breath. Now, a panic attack usually lasts about 4 to 6 minutes, and here's how you can treat it. Slow your breathing, focus on the present, count backwards from 20, stretch your body head to toe, and remind yourself that panic attacks always end and they can't harm you. We're addressing this issue in its various forms at explain.co.za in different series. Check out our video this week on how parents can help manage their child's school anxiety during a pandemic. The link is below this podcast. And in this week's inspiration, we're inspired by Dr. Verashni Pillay, a 92-year-old doctor, general practitioner, who is still treating COVID-19 patients. He told the Sunday Times this week, "There will be plenty of time to rest when I am dead. Right now, I have God's work to do." Before the pandemic, he'd work a full day at his practice in Merebank, Durban, and drive himself home at 6 p.m. each evening. Time for your international roundup. We got a couple of countries for you, so let's run through them as we draw towards the end of this podcast. Turkey. First a cathedral, then a mosque, then a museum, and back to a mosque. For the first time in 86 years, the iconic Hagia Sophia in Turkey will open its doors for prayer after a court ruled that the building's conversion to a museum under modern Turkey's founding father was illegal. First built as the world's then largest church in the year 537, it was used as a political tool by the competing religions of rulers and invaders for hundreds of years. And it doesn't seem like that's stopping anytime soon. Its conversion to a museum was seen as a victory for the newly secular state and a symbol of peaceful nation building, and the decision to convert it back into a mosque has seen mixed reactions from global religious leaders. UNESCO says it will now review Hagia Sophia's status on the World Heritage List. On to India. The country now has the third highest number of coronavirus cases in the world. The nation reported a spike of over 27,000 cases just on Saturday, but compared to other badly affected nations, its death rate has remained low. Meanwhile, in Brazil, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has downplayed the threat of COVID-19, as we've told you previously, flouted social distancing guidelines and said that his athletic history would protect him, amongst other moronic statements. Meanwhile, this week, he tested positive for coronavirus, according to The Economist, joining a long list of top government officials who have succumbed to the virus. We hate to say we told you so, but yeah. USA, the Trump administration gave formal notice to the World Health Organization that America will withdraw from the international body on the 6th of July 2021, in about a year's time. Now, Joe Biden, who is running against Trump for president, said that he will scrap that decision and rejoin the WHO if he is elected US president in November. Meanwhile, in Serbia, things could be worse in South Africa if we look at Serbia. We tend to whine about our lockdown restrictions on social media, but in Serbia, people are rioting over their new lockdown. Protesters defying a ban on gathering threw bottles, rocks, and flares at police, who responded with tear gas, according to The Guardian. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of explained.co.za. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.co.za/subscribe. Next time, goodbye from Verashni, Arati, and the Explain.co.za team.